The rusted hull of the derelict merchant vessel loomed before Marcus Kane as he guided his salvaged ship into position. 15 years of scavenging space debris had taught him to recognize valuable finds, and this one promised to be worth the 3-week journey to the outer rim. Life support systems still operational, his ship's AI reported. Detecting minimal power signatures from the lower decks. Marcus adjusted his environment suit and checked his weapon. Standard procedure, though he rarely encountered anything more dangerous than malfunctioning service droids. Keep the engines hot, Nova. I won't be long. The airlock cycled with a hiss, and Marcus entered the abandoned vessel. His boots magnetized to the metal floor as he moved through the eerily silent corridors. The emergency lights cast everything in a dim red glow, creating long shadows that danced as he passed. The ship's cargo manifest had shown promising technology shipments, but as Marcus descended to the lower decks, something felt off. The damage patterns didn't match typical pirate raids or mechanical failures. Some of the interior walls showed signs of weapons fire from the inside out. A faint sound caught his attention, rhythmic and mechanical, coming from behind a sealed door marked Storage B7. Marcus overrode the lock with his universal decoder, and the door slid open with a grinding protest. The sight inside made him freeze. Instead of cargo containers, the room contained a sophisticated stasis chamber. Inside, suspended in a pale blue field, floated a figure unlike any alien species Marcus had encountered. Its skin was covered in iridescent scales that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue. Multiple arms were held in place by energy restraints, and a breathing apparatus covered most of its face. But what struck Marcus most were its eyes, open and alert, fixing him with an intelligent gaze that held both wariness and desperation. This was no ordinary prisoner transport. The technology keeping the alien contained was military-grade, worth a fortune on the black market. Marcus's salvage scanner beeped, detecting rare elements in the stasis field generator. He could power down the system, strip it for parts, and make enough credits to retire. The alien's gaze never wavered, and Marcus felt the weight of the choice before him. His hand hovered over the stasis controls. The smart play was to take the tech and go, safer, cleaner, definitely more profitable. But Marcus hadn't survived this long by ignoring his instincts, and everything about this situation screamed wrong. The alien's eyes tracked his movement as he accessed the control panel. Warning messages flashed across the screen: caution, containment breach, and subject, classified, military authority. Marcus hesitated for one more moment before making his decision. Nova, he called over his comm, prepare the med bay. We're about to have company. The stasis field flickered and died. The alien fell forward, and Marcus caught them before they hit the ground. The breathing apparatus detached automatically, revealing a face with distinctly feminine features. She took her first real breath in what must have been months, then spoke in perfect universal standard. The others, she rasped, we have to warn them. Then her eyes rolled back, and she lost consciousness. Marcus lifted her carefully, noting how light she felt despite her imposing height. Nova, scan the system for any pursuit vessels. Something tells me we're about to have more company than we bargained for. As he carried the unconscious alien back to his ship, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just stepped into something much bigger than a simple salvage operation. The military didn't waste high-end containment technology on ordinary prisoners, and they definitely didn't leave them floating in space unless they wanted them hidden. He looked down at his unexpected passenger as Nova's airlock cycled. What kind of trouble did I just buy into? He muttered. The only answer was the distant sound of his ship's alert system, warning of approaching vessels at the edge of sensor range. Marcus's ship shuddered as another blast grazed their shields. In the med bay, his alien passenger stirred, all four arms instinctively moving to defensive positions before her eyes snapped open. Easy, Marcus said, raising his hands. You're safe. I'm Marcus Kane, and this is my ship, the Star Chaser. She assessed him quickly, taking in the med bay and the sound of weapons fire. I am Commander Viwexera of the Nexus Defense Force. And we are not safe. The ship rocked again. Military pursuit vessels? 3 of them. Showed up right after I pulled you out. Marcus helped her stand as she swung her legs off the med bed. Care to tell me why the Galactic military is so interested in keeping you on ice? Viwexera moved with fluid grace despite her recent stasis. Because I discovered something they want buried. Something that threatens both our species. She steadied herself against a wall as another blast hit. Your shields won't hold much longer. Nova, status report, Marcus called out. Shields at 32%. 2 pursuit vessels moving to flank us. The third is maintaining distance, likely coordinating their attack pattern. Viwexera's scales shifted color, darkening to a deep midnight blue. Your ship, it's a Meridian-class salvage vessel, correct? Designed for debris field navigation? Marcus nodded. Best maneuverability in its class. Why? A predatory smile crossed her face. Because I know how we can escape. She moved toward the bridge with surprising speed. The Meridian's neural interface can support 2 pilots. With your permission? Marcus hesitated only a moment before following her. Nova, grant bridge access. They reached the control room as another volley of shots illuminated the viewport. Viwexera took the co-pilot's seat, her 4 arms connecting to the neural interface points with practiced ease. There's a debris field from an old mining operation about 60,000 kilometers ahead, she said. We can lose them there, but I'll need you to trust me. Marcus strapped himself in. I already broke you out of military custody. Might as well go all in. He initiated the neural link, and suddenly he could feel Viwexera's presence in the ship's systems, precise, disciplined, with centuries of tactical experience flowing through her consciousness. The Star Chaser's engines roared as they pushed toward the debris field. The pursuit vessels closed in, their superior engines rapidly gaining ground. Warning lights flashed across the console as their shields absorbed another barrage. Shields at 18%, Nova reported. Direct hit will cause significant damage. Viwexera's hands danced across the controls. When I give the signal, cut power to everything except life support and maneuvering thrusters. Her scales rippled with concentration. They're using standard military pursuit algorithms. We can use that against them. They reached the edge of the debris field, a maze of twisted metal and shattered asteroids left over from the collapsed mining operation. The pursuit vessels spread out, trying to box them in. Now! Viwexera commanded. Marcus killed the power. The Star Chaser went dark, momentum carrying them into the field. Through the neural link, he felt Viwexera's calculations, trajectory, mass, velocity, all factored with military precision. She fired the maneuvering thrusters in short bursts, using the debris itself as cover. Behind them, the pursuit vessels opened fire. But their shots hit only empty space and floating debris. Their quarry had vanished into the metallic maze. They're scanning for our power signature, Marcus whispered, though there was no need for quiet in space. Standard procedure, Viwexera replied. But they're expecting us to run. They won't think to look. She fired one last thruster burst, tucking them into the hollow cavity of a massive mining drill head. Right here. They watched through the viewport as the pursuit vessels swept the area, their search patterns growing increasingly desperate. After 20 tense minutes, the ships regrouped and jumped to hyperspace, leaving them alone in the debris field. Marcus released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. That was either brilliant or insane. In my experience, the best tactics are often both. Viwexera disconnected from the neural interface, her scales shifting to a lighter shade. You took an enormous risk freeing me. I owe you an explanation. I'd settle for knowing what I just got myself involved in. Viwexera's expression darkened. A conspiracy that goes to the highest levels of both our governments. One that could lead to war between our species if we don't stop it. She met his gaze. There's no going back now. They'll be hunting both of us. Marcus ran a diagnostic on the ship's systems. Story of my life. Always picking up strays and trouble. He glanced at her. So, Commander, where do we go from here? There's a secure facility on Nexus Prime. If we can reach it, I can prove everything. But we'll need help. She studied him thoughtfully. You're a salvage expert. How are your contacts in the less legitimate sectors of space? A smile tugged at Marcus's lips. Let's just say I know people who are good at making other people disappear. He began powering up the ship's systems. Assuming we survive long enough to reach them. If it's any comfort, Viwexera said, her scales rippling with what might have been amusement, in my culture, we believe the greatest honors come from the most dangerous endeavors. Yeah? And what's the honor in helping an escaped military prisoner? That depends entirely on what we discover. She turned to face him fully. And whether we live long enough to reveal it. The neon lights of New Singapore's underground district painted Viwexera's scales in shifting patterns of pink and blue. Even with the hooded cloak concealing her extra arms, she drew curious glances from the station's diverse population. Marcus led them through winding corridors, descending deeper into the station's unofficial levels. Your contact, Viwexera said quietly, can they be trusted? Maya? She's the most trustworthy criminal I know. Marcus paused at a security checkpoint, exchanging a subtle nod with the guard. Which isn't saying much, but she owes me her life twice over. They entered a dimly lit bar called the Blind Spot. A dark-skinned woman with cybernetic eyes looked up from behind the counter, her expression shifting from recognition to wariness when she spotted Viwexera. Marcus Kane, Maya said, you always bring the most interesting problems to my door. Good to see you too, Maya. He glanced around the empty bar. We need to talk. Privately. Maya led them through a hidden door into a secure room filled with surveillance equipment. As soon as the door sealed, Viwexera removed her cloak, stretching all four arms with visible relief. Well, Maya whistled, a Nexus warrior. No wonder the military channels are buzzing. She turned to Marcus. You really stepped in it this time. Show her, Marcus said to Viwexera. The alien warrior produced a small data crystal from a hidden compartment in her scales. This contains evidence of a joint operation between human and Nexus military leaders. They're manufacturing a conflict between our species. Maya inserted the crystal into her secure terminal. Data streams filled the holographic display, classified documents, communications logs, and tactical analyses. Her cybernetic eyes whirred as they processed the information. They're staging attacks on both sides, Maya said, her voice hardening. Making it look like aggression from the other species. But why? Resources, Viwexera explained. There's a newly discovered element in the Barrier Nebula. It could revolutionize faster-than-light travel, but it's incredibly rare. Rather than negotiate sharing rights. They'd rather start a war and let the winner take all, Marcus finished. Classic divide and conquer. Maya's fingers flew over the controls. These authorization codes, they go all the way up to the Human Defense Council. And your Nexus High Command is equally implicated. She looked at Viwexera. No wonder they wanted you contained. I discovered the truth during a routine patrol. They couldn't risk killing me, my death would have triggered too many questions within the Nexus military hierarchy. So they opted for permanent detention instead. Marcus leaned against the wall. And now they'll be hunting us both. Along with anyone who helps us. He gave Maya an apologetic look. She waved him off. Please. My reputation would suffer if I started playing it safe now. Her cybernetic eyes focused on the data. But exposing this won't be easy. They'll have fail-safes, contingencies. We need something more concrete than data files. The staging area, Viwexera said suddenly. Where they're coordinating the false flag attacks. If we can get physical evidence, record the operations in progress. That's suicide, Maya interrupted. Those facilities will be heavily guarded. Not all of them. Marcus straightened, an idea forming. The salvage operation where I found you, it wasn't random, was it? They were using abandoned ships for something. Viwexera's scales rippled with excitement. Yes. The derelict vessel was a testing ground for their staged attacks. They were perfecting the damage patterns, making sure they'd match known weapon signatures from both species. Maya pulled up the sector maps. I can get you updated security protocols for the region. The military's been redirecting patrol routes. If we overlay the patterns. A cluster of points illuminated. There. That's where they're staging their operations. We'll need a plan, Marcus said. And supplies. My ship's good for salvage, but a military facility is another story. I can help with that. Maya opened a secure channel. I know some people who'd be very interested in preventing an interspecies war. Especially one built on lies. She looked at them seriously. But this is your last chance to walk away. Once we commit to this, there's no going back. Marcus glanced at Viwexera. In the short time since he'd freed her, they'd developed an odd sort of trust. She'd proven herself in combat, saved their lives with her tactical skills, and shown a determination that matched his own. I stopped walking away from fights when I pulled you out of that stasis chamber, he said. Besides, I've always wanted to overthrow a corrupt military conspiracy. Viwexera's scales shifted to a deep, royal purple, a color he'd come to associate with resolve. In my culture, we have a saying, the path of honor is rarely safe, but always necessary. How philosophical, Maya smirked. Now, let's talk about how we're going to keep you both alive long enough to expose this conspiracy. As they began planning, Marcus couldn't help but wonder how a routine salvage operation had led him here, plotting against military leaders with an alien warrior and a cybernetic information broker. But looking at Viwexera, seeing the determination in her otherworldly eyes, he knew he'd made the right choice. The galaxy was about to change. He just hoped they'd survive to see it. The abandoned military facility loomed before them, a dark silhouette against the nebula's swirling colors. Marcus and Viwexera crouched behind a ridge of space debris, watching patrol drones sweep the perimeter. Maya's intel was right, Marcus whispered into their secure comm, they're using automated security. Minimal human or Nexus presence. Viwexera's scales had shifted to match the dark metal of their surroundings. They're overconfident. No one's supposed to know this place exists. She checked their borrowed stealth suits. The dampeners are holding. We're invisible to their standard scans. They waited for the patrol pattern to cycle, then moved. Viwexera's 4 arms made quick work of the external access panel while Marcus kept watch. The door slid open silently, revealing darkened corridors. Remember, Viwexera said, we need proof of both species' involvement. Without it, each side will deny everything. They moved deeper into the facility, following Maya's mapped route to the command center. But as they passed a sealed laboratory, Viwexera suddenly stopped. Her scales pulsed with an emotion Marcus hadn't seen before. Something's wrong, she said. This energy signature, it's familiar. Before Marcus could respond, she was already bypassing the lab's security. The door opened to reveal rows of stasis chambers similar to the one he'd found her in. But these weren't empty. By the void, Viwexera breathed. Inside each chamber floated a hybrid creature, part human, part Nexus, their bodies twisted by crude genetic manipulation. None of them were conscious, but monitoring equipment showed they were alive. They're not just staging attacks, Marcus realized, checking the research logs. They're trying to create the perfect weapon. Soldiers with human adaptability and Nexus combat capabilities. These are my people, Viwexera's voice cracked. And yours. They weren't just taken from military ranks, there are civilians here. Test subjects for their experiments. Marcus downloaded the lab data while Viwexera moved between the chambers, her scales now a deep, mournful blue. We have to help them. And we will, he promised. But first we need to find who's behind this. All of it. They found their answer in the command center. As Maya's codes cracked the security, displays lit up showing the full scope of the operation. It wasn't just military leaders, corporate interests had funded the program, betting on war profiteering. The hybrid soldiers were meant to be their private army after the conflict destabilized both governments. Wait, Marcus said, noticing a pattern in the communications. These orders, they're not coming from military command. They're coming from the Peace Council. The what? The Interspecies Peace Council. They're supposed to be mediating relations between humans and the Nexus. He pulled up more files. They've been playing both sides, pushing us toward war while pretending to maintain peace. Viwexera's scales turned almost black with rage. They're using the Council's diplomatic channels to coordinate everything. The perfect cover. Suddenly, alarms blared. On the security feeds, ships appeared at the edge of the sector, both human and Nexus military vessels. We've been compromised, Marcus said, frantically copying the last of the files. Maya must have been discovered. No, Viwexera's eyes widened as she read an incoming transmission. They're not here for us. The Council is launching their plan early. These ships, they're going to destroy this facility, eliminate all evidence. Including the test subjects. Marcus checked their options. Their stealth ship could maybe take 2, 3 survivors at most. There were dozens in the labs. We can't save them all, he said quietly. No, Viwexera's scales shifted to a color he'd never seen, a deep, burning gold. But we can make their deaths mean something. She interfaced with the facility's systems, her 4 arms working in perfect synchronization. Help me broadcast everything. All channels, all frequencies. If we're going to die here, let's make sure everyone knows why. Marcus joined her at the console. Outside, the military ships began their attack run. But in the command center, 2 beings from different worlds worked together, racing against time to expose a truth that could save both their species. The facility's transmitters hummed to life, broadcasting their evidence across the galaxy. The truth about the Peace Council, the hybrid experiments, the manufactured war, all of it streaming to every corner of known space. The first missile struck the outer hull as the transmission completed. Marcus looked at Viwexera, seeing in her eyes the same determination he felt. Now what? He asked. She reached out, taking his hand with one of hers. Now we make sure we live to testify. I didn't survive stasis just to die here. She pulled up the facility's schematics. There's a maintenance shaft that leads to the emergency pods. If we hurry. The ceiling groaned as another blast rocked the facility. They ran, leaving behind the evidence of humanity's greatest crime and the seeds of its possible redemption. The truth was out. Now they just had to survive long enough to see what grew from it. The emergency pod tumbled through space, its systems barely functioning after their desperate escape. Through the viewport, Marcus watched the research facility explode, taking with it the evidence of countless atrocities. But the truth was already spreading across the galaxy, impossible to contain. Multiple vessels approaching, Nova reported through their linked communicators. Both human and Nexus signatures. Viwexera's scales flickered weakly, she'd been hit during their escape, and the pod's medical supplies were minimal. They'll be looking for survivors to silence. Good thing we're not planning to survive quietly. Marcus activated the pod's emergency beacon, but not on standard frequencies. This was a signal Maya had prepared, meant for very specific ears. Within minutes, a massive ship dropped out of hyperspace, a Nexus dreadnought, its hull bearing the marks of countless battles. But instead of opening fire, it extended its shields around their pod. The liberation, Viwexera breathed, her scales brightening slightly. Admiral Kexri's ship. She was my mentor before they took me. The dreadnought's hangar bay swallowed their pod just as the pursuing vessels arrived. But they weren't alone. More ships appeared, human vessels, bearing the insignia of the reformed fleet, commanders who'd refused to follow corrupt orders. On the bridge of the Liberation, they found organized chaos. Admiral Kexri, a towering Nexus warrior with battle-scarred scales, coordinated with human Captain Elena Torres of the reformed fleet. Their broadcast had reached the right people, those who'd suspected the corruption but lacked proof. The Peace Council is attempting damage control, Torres reported, her hologram flickering beside them. But their own security measures damned them. Every transmission, every order was logged and authenticated. Their experiments? Viwexera asked, leaning heavily against Marcus. The survivors are being treated, Kexri answered, her scales rippling with contained fury. Both our people's medical experts are working to undo what was done to them. Some may recover fully. Others. She left the sentence unfinished. And the council members? Running, Torres smiled grimly. But not for long. We've frozen their assets, locked down their escape routes. The very systems they built to control us are now their prison. Marcus felt Viwexera tense beside him. There will be those who still want war. Who won't accept peace. There already are, Kexri acknowledged. But now we have something stronger than their lies, proof that cooperation between our species isn't just possible, it's necessary. She gestured to Marcus and Viwexera. You two prove that. The real fight's just beginning, Torres added. Rebuilding trust, establishing new protocols, making sure this can never happen again. We'll need you both. Marcus looked at Viwexera, seeing the question in her iridescent eyes. When he'd found her in that stasis chamber, he'd been a simple salvage operator. Now he was at the center of a galactic revolution. I'm not much for politics, he said. But I'm good at finding things people want hidden. Might be useful for your rebuilding efforts. Viwexera's scales shifted to that deep gold he'd seen in the facility, not rage, he now realized, but purpose. In my culture, we believe that bonds forged in battle are unbreakable. You freed me, Marcus Kane, but more than that, you believed in me. Believed in the truth. She straightened, her warriors bearing returning despite her injuries. I will help forge this peace, but not from a warship's bridge. I would rather work alongside the one who showed me that trust between our species is possible. A partnership then, Marcus smiled. Human ingenuity and Nexus honor? More than that, she replied. A beginning. Admiral Kexri's scales rippled with approval. Then let it be recorded. In the aftermath of our greatest crisis, hope emerged not from grand councils or military might, but from the trust between two beings who chose to believe in something better. The bridge viewport showed the gathered fleet, human and Nexus ships flying together, protecting the truth they discovered. Beyond them, the nebula's colors painted space in swirling patterns of light, like Viwexera's scales when she smiled. Marcus took her hand, feeling the smooth scales against his skin. They'd started as salvager and prisoner, became allies of necessity, and emerged as something new, proof that the greatest treasures aren't found in abandoned ships, but in the choices we make and the trust we build. The galaxy was changing. And for once, Marcus was exactly where he needed to be.